So Henry Stanton, the Canterbury candidate for the Green Party in the upcoming elections, thank you very much for your time and for joining me in my kitchen. Things happened quite fast, and obviously I'm also with the Canterbury Residents Group organising the Canterbury City Show at the moment, and the timing's meant that the beautiful TV studios that we used the last time around for our election interviews weren't available for us. So we decamped to the kitchen, and we're going to have a chat at the kitchen table about yourself, about Canterbury, and about national issues. And I want to start, like I say, talking about you and give you a chance to let those in Canterbury Residents Group get to know you a little bit.
Yeah.
So I think one of the best ways to do that is to ask people about their upbringing, about where they were born and bred, if you like.
Yeah.
So tell me about yours.
So I moved here when I was 6 and went to a rural primary school that my kids now go to. I went to the Boys Langton, and I did my first degree at Bristol University, but then later I did a PGCE at Christ Church University, and then I changed careers about 16 years later and did a master's at the University of Kent.
Okay.
Yeah. So I know the area pretty well. I love the area, and I'm bringing my family up here.
So you've been here as a student, as a resident, as a person working in the community, as a person campaigning in the community.
Yeah, so I spent 15 years teaching at Queensworth Grammar School in Faversham. So definitely spent some time working in the community. And as a campaigner, I've done quite a lot of different things sort of as part of the Green Party, like campaigning on air pollution, campaigning against the multi-storey car park, campaigning about the water pollution in Whitstable and in the Stour. So yeah, it's been a thing that I've been doing for some time now.
Yeah. So I'm often interested as to what drew people towards the political party that they're in. I guess the obvious question is, was it environmental issues alone? What are your core values as a person, and how do they align with the Green parties?
That's a good question. I think for me, I was, as I say, brought up in a rural area, so I've always enjoyed nature. I've always enjoyed being outside. I really like walking and hiking, for example, and camping. So I suppose in that respect, I've always been aware of the environment and been able to witness the impact of certain human activities on the environment. So that is one side of it. And then the other side of it is just a natural desire to want to help people and make people's lives better. So I spent a long time doing that as a teacher. But my original degree was actually in politics. So I've always been interested in politics.
This is at Kent Uni.
No, that was at Bristol University. Okay. And a checkered career of studying. But no, it was just that... So what I'm saying is that I've just always been aware of the importance of politics and the impact that politicians can have. I know we speak at a time when really confidence in politics and politicians is at an all-time low. However, the truth of the matter is that people still are beholden to politicians to make decisions that affect them. And it is still the politicians that make those choices. Now, you can say, oh, well, the media have an influence on them, or pressure groups have an influence on them, and that's true. But at the end of the day, it is them who actually do the voting. And so I still have a belief in the power of politicians to effect change and make people's lives better.
It's an interesting election, obviously. It's, it's going to be a very interesting to see what happens, but there's a lot of predictions that the current government are going to be in post, and I think that obviously that throws up potential for coalitions. who knows whether or not majorities will be won. But if coalitions come about, quite often I think politicians are perhaps asked to compromise on some of their beliefs if they're gonna work with other parties. And obviously as well in Canterbury, we have a system where the council and the MP can be from different political backgrounds.
Yep.
How do your core beliefs pan out when you're forced to kind of work with other people that maybe don't hold the same beliefs?
So, I mean, that is the essence of politics, isn't it, really, is of trying to bring people together, even if they do have incompatible beliefs. However, I think the lesson of us now having, the Green Party now having 4 councillors on the Canterbury Council, is that although we're not in coalition, we are able to have a profound influence on what the parties that are in power are doing. So if you have a Green person in the room, suddenly those people in those parties that profess to be somewhat green, and both in this case the Labour and Liberal Democrats say that they are fully on board with the idea of there being a climate emergency, for example. If you've got Green councillors there actually holding them to account, then you find that a lot more action happens of a green nature than would happen if we weren't there. So to project that onto a national scale, there's no question that Caroline Lucas has made a real impact in Parliament as a Green voice and has forced people to consider the Green voice, as has our general presence nationally. The number of votes that both Labour and the Lib Dems and now the Conservatives lose to us because of environmental concerns that are occupying the whole country now means that they have to be more green than they otherwise would do. And what's quite good about that is that there is no such thing as a wasted Green vote, therefore. I mean, it helps us as a party anyway, because it will ultimately increase the amount of funding we get. But also, every single Green vote is looked at by the other parties as a vote that is taken away from them. And that means that they have to take more notice of us every single time anyone votes for us.
Okay. So, I'm going to do this again later as well, actually. I want you to imagine that you've won and you're becoming Canterbury's MP.
Mm-hmm.
What would be the effect on your life? What's your family's thoughts on this kind of thing, your friends and your impact on your job? And, how would life look different for you if you won?
Well, it would be a hefty pay rise for a start, so that would be a nice thing to have. But I think...
what do you think about MPs' pay then? Do you think...
Well, I think that they definitely earn more than I do. So
higher or lower for MPs' pay?
I actually think there probably is a case for paying them a bit more because you want the brightest and best to be able to do it. But I would actually say that even irrespective of that, the most important thing that you could do in terms of increasing pay is to pay councillors, because at the moment our local councillors have to work at least 3, maybe 4 days a week minimum to get their work done, and they get paid an allowance of around about £5,000 a year. So it excludes everyone who has to work, basically. And the same goes for county councillors as well. So if there was one thing you could do to improve that situation, it would be to pay them more. But to go back to your original question, my family are very, very supportive. They are also, Green Party supporters. And the main issue for me would be trying to maintain a work-life balance, because I think most good MPs do work very hard. I've got young children. I'd want to continue to be able to sort of do their bedtimes, get home in time to have tea with them and stuff. So it would be... that would be something I would find very challenging.
I think, there's a lot of talk at the moment about the impact of the job on MPs, families and their own health. And I think that's something which we might come on to later. I want to talk a bit about Canterbury. Mm-hmm. I think we can get out of the way now our agreement that it's the best city in the world.
Absolutely.
And we start from that point, where we're the same. do you think is the most pressing issue for Canterbury at the moment? What's the number one thing on your mind for the city?
It's hard to look beyond planning, because the planning that has been done so far has been really ineptly done. And the things that people in Canterbury complain about are things like the traffic, the state of the high street, the parking, the air pollution. And we are focusing just on Canterbury here rather than the constituency in Whitstable and things like that, because obviously there are issues in Whitstable as well. But specifically in Canterbury, all the parties have talked for a long time about this idea of modal shift and trying to get people into buses, walking or cycling. But none of the planning decisions that have been made actually allow that to happen. And so you've got situations like you can try and cycle down the New Dover Road, for example, which is one of the proposed new bike lanes. But when you get to the roundabout, you then have to, in theory, get off your bike and walk it round underneath the underpass. I mean, that's not a way of actually achieving modal shift. You've got to make it really easy for people if you want them to cycle.
Obviously, there's like a cross of different agencies and groups in charge of all of that. I think, there's lots of decision makers, the county council, the city council. How much influence does the role of MP have over things like transport in Canterbury? I mean, do you think that you'd be able to, enact change or?
Yeah, it's a good question. I mean, ultimately, the transport specifically is determined by Kent County Council for the roads, and then to some extent the local council. They have a specific committee called the Joint Transportation Board, which meets between those two different councils, and then they are able to try and make decisions about transport. But then some of it is overseen by the National Highways Agency. I mean, already we're losing our listeners at this point, aren't we? Because
so as MP, I guess you're just about making waves and putting pressure in the right places.
Absolutely. I think as an MP, you can have a real impact on those kind of different groups that need to be forced together and almost have their heads knocked together to say, look, we have to prioritise.
Do you think
modal shift, for example? And that means bringing the bus services back, making sure there are actual safe cycle lanes with the cycling infrastructure you need, and green areas where people are actually happy to walk rather than just walking along the main road.
I think, another big thing that the Green Party are going to be very good on is an issue which comes up a lot in the residents group, and that's things like the care of our rivers, litter across Canterbury, fly tipping. I guess at a national level, you'd be able to, work to help councils prevent this kind of thing happening. Again, like how does the lines blur? What can you do as a national politician on such local issues?
Yeah, another good question. I mean, we have seen with Rosie that she has been able to bring some of the key players in the sewage issue together. However, there is a limit to how much you can do, because ultimately what we need to sort the sewage and the river situation.
Yeah, well, the sewage is another issue, yeah.
Yeah, but to take that one example, what we need is a massive amount of investment in more sewage works, so that we can actually have the capacity to clean all that water.
That's something the Green Party is promising?
We're promising not just that, but to actually nationalise the water companies, because at the moment all that's happening is that they are not doing the investment that's required and returning a massive amount of the money we're spending on our water bills straight into the pockets of the shareholders.
So fully nationalised water companies.
Yeah.
Any other industries?
We would also nationalise the electricity companies and the rail companies as well. I mean, the rail companies pretty much are nationalised already, but yeah, the electricity companies we would as well.
Okay, yeah. Something which is already nationalised. We'll talk about privatisation of it as well. Perhaps is the A&E. The health service, the NHS. A&E, of course, being on my mind, because one of the most frequently asked questions, yes or no, do you support there being an A&E in Canterbury? Would you be campaigning for a new A&E to be reopened?
Yeah, I mean, that is a really difficult question to answer because obviously I would like that to happen. I took my daughter to the minor injuries unit just, 2 weeks ago at Canterbury, and they were brilliant. We only had to wait half an hour. And I just thought to myself, why is it that if this had been a more serious injury, I would have had to go to William Harvey, and I know that I would have been there for probably 12 hours because our A&E in Ashford is the second worst for waiting times in the whole country. So the issue then is like, well, if the A&E in Ashford was okay and we did get treated within half an hour, then I would probably be quite happy with that. And the Green Party plan is to put an extra £48 billion into the NHS. And the reason, and that would be, by the way, fully costed with a form of wealth tax on the richest 1%. So those who earn over 10 million a year.
So taxing that 1%, at what level?
I can't remember what the actual percentage is, but it's not a very large percentage.
And it can pay for all of that.
No, it's not. There are sort of three taxes that we're going to do. One is to bring the capital gains tax back into line with income tax. So Rishi Sunak currently pays 20%, but like an effective rate of 20% on his earnings of $3 million last year. Fair play to him for admitting to that, because a lot of people would be quite embarrassed to admit to that. But that's absolutely preposterous that he's not even paying the higher rate of tax on those earnings. So, and that's just because of the way that he is being paid his money. So we'd bring CGT back in line with income tax. We would introduce this wealth tax, and then we'd also put national insurance rates back up to the same level for, I think it's for corporations as they were before austerity. So that should raise between 50 to 70 billion a year, we believe. And there's a carbon tax as well.
Carbon tax, of course.
Yeah.
And so that's the funding model. That's it. Where else would Canterbury be seeing the benefits of that increased tax take? The A&E. What other sort of tangible thing in Canterbury might people be able to expect from that?
So I think, first of all, to those people who are struggling with housing, which I think is one of the things that really concerns a lot of people, we would plan on building 150,000 council houses for every year of the next Parliament. So that would actually, and in Canterbury, the way we'd like to approach it, and this is a bit difficult because we're kind of going to have to assume that we also are in charge of the council as well as having a Green MP, but Green government. But if we were in charge of the draft local plan, we would have completely reworked the draft local plan rather than what's been done at the moment, which is essentially just a rehash, developer-led, of what we've already got that the Conservatives did. What we'd like to see is a complete recalculation of the figures and the nature of the type of housing we need. So in Canterbury at the moment, we're trying to make houses for 60,000 people, and the vast majority of those houses are going to be luxury 3-bedroom or more developments with space for at least 2 cars on every one. So if you look at the Blean plan, for example, that's got 2,000 homes. They're all luxury homes. They're all going to have cars. However, the reality is that those are the numbers that are based on the 2014 census, when growth was predicted in the population. If you look at the 2018 census and the 2021 census, the figures there show a massive slowdown in population growth. So what's going to happen, actually, if you use those calculations, the increase is going to be around 9,000. We need housing for 9,000 people, and the people who need those houses are the elderly, renters, and people, young people without children. So actually the type of housing we need is small 1 and 2 bedroom properties, not these luxurious ones with lots of cars and things. So I don't know if I'm getting to the point here, but basically what the Canterbury would see if we were in charge is more council housing, which would make a massive difference to the homeless crisis that we have in Canterbury. And we'd also see much less traffic and much better quality developments in small specific areas where it wouldn't impact on the congestion?
Well, I was going to ask as well on in terms of development. What are your views on development of, for example, the University of Kent's plan to build off the side of their land?
The Blean project, as it were. Yeah, it's a really bad idea. It's a beautiful area of biodiversity. It is also agricultural land, which we don't want to be chewing into. The infrastructure around Blean cannot support that level of increasing population in terms of roads, in terms of and traffic, therefore, and in terms of the school and the healthcare services as well. So it's and the nature of the houses is not going to provide housing for Canterbury people. It's providing housing for people who come down from London. So it doesn't help Canterbury at all. Whereas our plan actually helps the people of Canterbury. I can go on more about the.
Well, I was just going to ask. I mean, purely the thing I find interesting about that particular plan is obviously the University of Kent have seen the effects of Brexit.
Yep.
So very quickly, position on Brexit.
It's been an economic catastrophe, and we would look to reverse it, starting off by rejoining the customs union and making sure that people can have free flow of travel across Europe.
So, yeah, I think that's a pretty straightforward position to hold.
Yep.
And, the effects of Brexit have been felt, for example, by the universities.
Yes.
And, using land to provide housing whilst recouping costs to prop up the universities is it inevitable?
Well, there's no question that certainly the University of Kent is in deep financial trouble, and so to talk about how the university itself gets itself out of that trouble, I'm not sure, because it's not clear at the moment. What I suppose, if you're asking how the Green Party would approach that, I mean, one of our positions is that we would get rid of tuition fees, and we'd also make it easier to be a foreign student in the UK. Now, our university used to make, as you point out, a huge amount of money from these foreign students. So it's an incredibly lucrative bit of business, and we should be really proud of that, rather than worrying about those immigration numbers. Almost every single foreign student comes over here, does their degree, and then goes home and starts a career back there. So, to say, oh, well, we'd bail out the university, or we'd encourage the university to sell off its land or build on its land, neither of those things is what we would look to do for the university, but we would try and create better circumstances for the universities to prosper.
Okay. We've covered a lot of topics there, really, as Canterbury. We've got about 10 minutes left. Okay. So I'm going to just ask you to imagine that you've been voted in. It's your first day in Parliament. You're making your maiden speech. You've got all the really important things about Canterbury out of the way.
Right.
What's your big kind of opening gambit in Parliament for your most pressing issue?
So I suppose the one that this is not really what you should do for your maiden speech, but the one that's niche and geeky but really, really matters to me for a long time is the idea of changing our electoral system to proportional representation. So it's not a very exciting thing to say, but I just think that a fair electoral system where people's votes actually count and they don't have to worry about tactical voting and all this kind of nonsense would make a profound difference to the UK. So that's the kind of uncool one. The other thing is that, having been a teacher for 15 years, I would really, really like to make an impassioned plea for the importance of education, just full stop. So many people have got sad stories about their time at school, and I think that's affected their feelings about education generally. And schools have changed a lot, and they can do more to get better. But at heart, education, I think, is the single most important thing that a government can do to change people's lives.
I mean, I think that's something which a lot of people on the residents group will agree with. People talk about schools a lot. Mm-hmm. People asking, parents showing a great deal of care and thought about which schools in Canterbury to choose.
Yeah.
Lots of questions as well about SEN provision in schools at the moment. what are your thoughts on SEN provision, and is it a suitable level? You're a teacher, you've got some first-hand experience of this.
Yeah, so I come in as a teacher and a parent of an autistic child, and I would say that on the one hand, the school that my son is at is brilliant with him, and he's a happy boy at that school. However, there's no question that the process we've had to go through to get a diagnosis, well, we haven't even got the diagnosis fully yet. We've been waiting 3 years for that. And the process of trying to get resources for the school to help him has been extremely challenging. It's taken a really long time. And that's, entirely down to a lack of funding from the central government. As a teacher of in a secondary school, as I was up until about 4 years ago, schools have come so far in terms of their capability for helping people with SEN get a really good education, and not just good grades, but also come out as strong, resilient, confident, happy people. But there is so much more that is needed in those schools, and it's not enough just to say, oh, well, they need a bigger photocopying budget so that they can print on pink paper, for example, for those people who've got a need for that. It needs really good counselling staff. We need physical areas in the school where people can go if they've got invisible disabilities.
I mean, and the thing is, there's a lot of specialist stuff there. There's a lot of there's a lot of very expensive stuff there.
Yep.
I think is the Green Party realistic about the spending when it comes to things like pumping lots into the NHS, lots into this, lots into that? It's a fully costed manifesto. So,
It is a fully costed manifesto. I think the thing to remember is that every single one of these things is an investment, because what happens to those SEN children if you don't provide what they need? Well, take a look at our prisons, because the stats on the number of people in our prisons who've got SEN is extraordinary. And, every single one of those people with SEN in a prison has at some point been deeply, profoundly misunderstood by the authorities. So if you actually invest at the earliest possible stage in education, and also Sure Start, I think, needs to be resurrected as well, then you will find that suddenly the impact that it's going to have on health, on antisocial behaviour, on the economy, on the amount you spend on benefits, all of those things are going to be affected in a positive way by the investment that you make in education in the first place.
Okay, a couple more subjects, and I'm gonna pin you with some quite quick answers to some really big subjects here. So I was really sort of, I apologise.
Okay, I'll try and keep it.
Whipped voting. A lot of people talking over this last government about their disappointment in not our MP, because she wasn't in government, but MPs across the country not voting the way that they think their constituents would want them to, but having to vote a certain way because of a whip. Being told by your party's leaders that you have to vote a certain way. What do you think about that system? Would you vote a certain way even if it was detrimental to Canterbury because you were being told to? What's your kind of overall view on that kind of system?
It's a really annoying system, but I think that it's in part the result of our first past the post voting system. If you have a coalition, then before, as a result of a proportional representation system, then before any of that voting is done, as a party, you agree your approximate lines of cooperation that you will do with whatever other parties are in that coalition. So I think a lot can be avoided by changing the voting system. But I think to some extent, being a politician is always going to be about trying to find compromises between different groups. So, yeah.
Talking about finding compromise for different groups, another huge subject, Palestine, Gaza, and the conflict between them and Israel. What's your views on that in as a concise manner as you can know?
You're not asking much, Ed.
Ceasefire or not, would you be calling for a ceasefire?
Yeah, the Green Party is the only party that's actually been consistent in calling for a ceasefire for the entire time. We've also called for an end to exporting of arms to Israel. We want to see the hostages in Israel rescued, and we want to see an end to the deaths of Israelis and Palestinians. We want an end to that. Nothing good can come from this conflict. So we have been, I think, very consistent in our approach to it. And we just want to make sure that the sickening images that we're seeing every day on television come to an end. And I think we're going to need to put, if we were in government, put pressure on the Israeli government to stop the military incursions that they're making. But this isn't about the country of Israel. This is about the people in charge of the Israeli government. You know, Benjamin Netanyahu is making these decisions, not the Israeli people.
And finally, I want to ask your view on the culture wars. This has, again, been a really interesting election for the fact that there are things that are coming up on the agenda to talk about these sorts of things that just weren't on the agenda at the last election. You know, when I did these interviews in 2019, we weren't talking about things like gender, sex, transgender rights, single-sex spaces. This is, you know, obviously a big issue for our incumbent MP as well. What's your view on the issue?
So basically, my starting point when it comes to trans rights is that I was a school teacher, and while I was a school teacher, I saw a number of students go from when I first encountered them at aged 11, go on a form of journey in which they ultimately transitioned, sometimes after they'd left the school, sometimes while they were going through the school. But when I think back to them, I always think back to them when I saw them aged 11 and they were scared and confused and vulnerable, and there wasn't anything else to them. And so when I think trans people often characterised as being, can be characterised unfairly as being shrill or loud or hysterical or anything like that. But I always just think back to those children and their need to be looked after and protected. So the trans rights, I know you're looking for a short answer here, is a very complicated, very, very complicated, unresolved debate. And there's an awful lot that's still being worked out, I suppose you could say. But the Green Party has a very clear position on trans rights, on trans women being women and trans men being men. But my fundamental feeling is, let's make sure that those children who have got no other agenda other than just trying to be happy people are looked after.
Great. I think that answers the question. And that about wraps up our time. Obviously, 45 minutes feels like it's going to be a long time. It flies past.
It really does.
Probably, we can't nearly touch on every subject, but thank you so much for your time. Henry Stanton is representing the Green Party in Canterbury.
Correct.
And also standing in Canterbury are Rosie Duffield for the Labour Party, Louise Harvey-Quirke for the Conservatives, Russ Timpson for the Liberal Democrats, Bridget Porter for Reform UK, and Luke Buchanan-Hodgman for the SDP. Once again, thank you very much for your time and best of luck.
Thank you very much, Ed. Thank you to everyone who's listened to this.